Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Marina podcast. I am, as always, your host, Marina. And today I'm super excited. I know I say that a lot, but you guys know that excitement is one of my favorite feelings and emotions. But I'm really excited today, and I'll explain why. I have the beautiful and the unbelievably talented Jasmine Smith. And we'll talk about how we actually connected. But she is a human design expert and an energetic embodiment coach. And just side note, she's also Egyptian royalty, but we'll get into that later. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this human design concept, and she's going to unpack it. But why I'm so excited is that she's actually offered to share my chart, which I know nothing about, today live on the show. So you're going to hear about it in a kind of a theory realm, but also see it applied to me, which I'm excited about, and I hope you are too. So firstly, though, Jasmine, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Marina. I'm so honored, excited, and just blissed out really to be here. So I'm excited too.
That's cool. That's cool. I want to ask you two questions, and they relate nothing to human design. The first is simply, if there was an animal that best represented your energy way of being, what animal would that be and why?
Such a good question. The first animal that comes to mind is a lioness. Mostly because they probably spend a lot of time like laying around in the sun and like sunbathing and like grooming, like that energy, but also super powerful, very fierce, lots of power. The eyesight of like spotting something, going after it, that kind of this heightened sense of seeing perhaps what other animals might miss. That's the first thing that came to mind.
What I love about that is it's not the first time I've heard lioness, but the reasoning is just so perfect. And I love the laying in the sun bit. I can relate to that. Although I would have said something like lizard to embody that. So I think you nailed it in a much more glamorous way. Awesome. And then if you could choose a superpower, and I feel like you already have superpowers, but if you could choose a superpower to have, which one would you choose and why?
This is very speaks to my personality. I'm like, so the superpower I would choose is to fly, but fly backwards in history, like in time and time travel.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's one superpower, but it's kind of two.
Yeah. Well, no, it's time travel, right? Well, and you'd also like to be able to fly. Cool. And where would you go if you had this like power right now? What point in the history would you go to first?
The ancient Egyptians, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, then I'm going to just straight off the top, I'm not even going to have anyone wait anymore. Tell me about this Egyptian royalty, please, because I'm fascinated with all things Egyptian. I'm actually wearing an ankh right now. Yeah.
So I love it. Yes. So my DNA, my heritage, my ethnicity, my father's 100% Egyptian, born and raised in Egypt. His brother, my uncle actually did his DNA, and he's 98% Egyptian. So the bloodline is very pure, and they have been there for as long as they've known in their family, lineage, until my dad left Egypt and came to the United States. So, and my DNA is 50% Egyptian. So there is this very strong connection that I have to my ancestors. Mm-hmm. And it is in my middle name means royalty in Arabic. And my dad said that they chose that because there's stories, there's reason to believe in our family lineage that our Egyptian DNA goes back to the pharaohs, the queens, the royalty of ancient Egypt.
That's amazing, because for anyone listening, if you have never done a DNA test, it's actually very rare to have 100% of your DNA from somewhere. So yes, like if someone's listening, well, she's only 50%, but if her father is 100%, that's like, especially here in Australia, we're very multicultural, but people often say, oh, I'm Australian, which definitely from somewhere else, unless you're, Aboriginal and Indigenous. So I understand what you're saying. And that's such a magical lineage to particularly genetically be tethered to, even on this timeline, right? Like, wow. So, okay, I love this. So we're going to talk about human design. Can you, for the listeners and for me, really boil down in simple beginner's terms, what is human design?
So that's like, let's like take a dissertation and put it into a sentence, you know? Human design is an experiential system. So the way that I like to describe it, it's a system that is meant to be used as an experiment or a tool for the individual person to get to know themselves, to self-liberate. And the way that I often explain it is like, it's kind of like a personality test, except it's not, because it's static. It doesn't change. Your personality can change, right? We can grow, we can expand, we can evolve, but it uses, human design uses your date of birth, location, time, when you're born, and a second sort of chart when 3 months or so before you're born.
Oh, well, see, this was, so I love the way that you mentioned it's like a personality test, because hand on heart, with all honesty, when, a human design sort of came up, and I will say this, I understand it's been around a long time, but you know how things kind of have waves, or they become the flavor, especially on social media. And everyone was like, oh, I did my human design chart. I'm this, what are you? And I must admit, I went and did like a quiz or something, and I got this answer, but I didn't really know anything more than that. And I was like, oh, it's like the new Myers-Briggs. This is what I thought, or it's the new way to define yourself or to better know yourself. But with the little bit of research I did, and then when you asked me for my birth information, which the only other time I've been asked for that is in deep astrological chart work, I was like, oh, no, this is really, it's not just my personality as in my preferences today, which are, as I feel you pointed to, highly conditioned. Like the Myers-Briggs I did when I was 22 and heavily in my masculine and achievement junkying is wildly different to what it is now, even though for sure there's core values. Like I get the value in those profile tools, but this is definitely more than a profile tool. So it seems to have lineages in multiple modalities, astrology being one, right? From what I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a synthesis of multiple esoteric ancient systems, as in the Hindu chakra system, the Kabbalah tree of life, the I Ching. So it's rooted in these really old ancient systems. It also looks at astrology. So it pulls from all of those sort of systems and synthesizes it into like, this is your energetic blueprint, is what, the words that I use. It's how you're energetically designed to be, versus like, something that you might do like an Enneagram, or something that might shift or change over your lifetime. This is static.
And so how and why would people want to get their human design? Like, why does it benefit to know this energetic blueprint? How does that serve?
Yeah. So for me, it served as a tool to better understand myself, to better explain how I work, to better, to get to know me and my energy, and also like a permission slip. Like when I learned that I was a specific type, a projector, and that projectors are considered non-energy types, and that I don't have these specific things that are called motors that give consistent energy. I have access to them, just like in astrology, there's always transits. And like, for example, we're recording this right before the full moon, which also happens to be an eclipse. Like those, we get to taste all the different flavors of human design, but then there's a blueprint that's ours, that's always us.
Yes, I love that. So because like I said, I've got people in my sphere who are mad obsessed about human design. Like if they're not talking about, their smoothie or their poop schedule, it's human design. It's just human design. And the sense I get from them is exactly what you just spoke into, this permission slip, like this deep acceptance of, oh, I don't have to fit the mold just because I do it differently. Like that's why I struggle in that space. And that's why, and then with that understanding of their unique nuance, it seems to allow them to just flourish. I mean, and we're going to get into the types in a second, but what I'm feeling is it must give them a sense of, I'll just own my strong suit, or like you said, my fraction of what's available in our ways of being. And in doing so, the way I see this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if we all just own our splice, if you will, then we all get to, as a collective, create the whole, in our magical way. Yeah. Is that true?
Absolutely. And I think it's this tool where I can look at myself through the lens of human design and say, wow, this is how I'm nuanced. This is how I'm different. And this is how we're the same. And it also gives us this compassion of like, wow, we're all so different. We all experience the world differently. We can relate to each other in these specific ways. Like you said, permission slip. Absolutely. One of the things that I spent so many years beating myself up about was how I couldn't keep up, or I always felt like I always felt behind, or like couldn't keep up with everybody else. And because I'm not designed to, it's like there's a nuance and I have a choice if I want to step out of that piece of me and into another piece of me,
Yeah, because I suppose that's the other side of that coin is people might go, oh, well, that's why I can't do that because I'm this. So therefore I just won't. I love how you keep referencing, and we can still dance in the magic. So can you explain the types of human design, like across the board? Because there's only a handful, right?
There's only a handful. Yep. So there's generators. Generators are 70% of the population. They're sort of the builders. They are the life force energy. They are the fuel. They are the prana. They have that. They can they're here to like master a thing, and they literally they have the energy to build the world that we live in. They create life. They create world. Then there's the
Generators. Yep.
Generators. Then there's the manifesting generators, which is sort of a tier of the generator. And the manifesting generators have that same life force energy, and they have access to the throat chakra, which we call that that's the manifestation. That's to bring things into manifest, to make form, so they get to use that fuel, that life force energy to birth things. And this is where you fall in, the manifesting generator.
Yeah, I feel like there was a resonance when you said that. Cool. I like it.
And the manifesting generator tends to
generate. I'm a
manifesting generator. Yep. Manifesting generator tends to have hands in lots of projects, 15 plates in the air, totally able to spin them. I know. I know.
No, what are you talking about? Yeah.
Right. And the manifesting generator is kind of like, well, can't everybody do that? I don't understand. Like, you can't hold 15 plates in the air and spin them at the same time? What's the deal? And then we have the projectors. So I'm a projector. Projectors are a non-energy type. They're here to guide. They see systems really well. They can see inefficiencies. They sort of see the big picture, or as I like to call it, the 30,000 foot view. They can get up high and go, oh, well, this is where, we should go. They're the guides, and they're here they just don't have the energy to build in the way that the generators do. They don't have access to that chakra that consistently, I should say. And then we have the manifestors. The manifestors are here to inform. They're here to tell us which way to go. They're here. They're the leaders. They're natural leaders. It can be uncomfortable sometimes to be in the presence of a manifestor, because it's like, oh, we're going to do this. And you're like, what? But also it can make people feel safe of like, oh, well, now I have a guidance of which way to go. And that's what they're here to do. Manifestors are 9% of the population. Projectors are 20%. And then we have the last one is the reflector. And I feel bad that they always get left last, but the reflector is 1% of the population. The reflectors are here to be mirrors. They're completely wide open. They're here to reflect back how the community is feeling, how the community is doing, how the individual is. They're a mirror. They're here to reflect. Sandra Bullock is a reflector. That's kind of a well-known person as an example, where she can kind of embody a lot of different things because she just mirrors back.
I love Sandra Bullock.
Me too.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So people fall into one of these, always fall into one of these 5. And then what?
And then there's like, gosh, I should know this number, but my mentor, I think there's 68 million different variances of charts, because that's the 5 general types. That's your type. And then there's profile lines. There's 12 of those, and there's different variations of those. And then there's the 64 gates, which comes from the hexagram from the I Ching. So everybody has a different variance of gates. And then there's the 9 energy centers, which I mentioned earlier, like the energy centers, like that comes from the sort of the Hindu chakra system. So some of those can be colored in or not colored in. We call them undefined or defined. So there's a lot of variances.
It sounds like, that multiple modalities have been laid over each other in human design, because astrology has 12 houses, and I understand the chakra system, having studied tantra and different energy, modalities. So it sounds like you're layering things over to kind of get like a light through, to essentially get a slightly more nuanced fingerprint.
Absolutely.
So then maybe as an example, so I'm a manifesting generator. And so what else does my chart tell you?
So I'll give you my favorite example, and I think we're a great example of the differences between you and I. And let's just start with, I'm a projector, you're a manifesting generator. One of the things that one of the ways that I love to explain this, because it's so simple, is I'm like an electric car. I happen to have a Nissan Leaf, which is like the early edition of like the really, really early edition of the electric car. So my car can't go more than 84 miles before I have to stop and charge it. Now I can charge it for half an hour, which is a quick charge, and then I could be on the road. But if I quick charge it every single time, I'm going to end up damaging the battery. It's not good for the car. It's not good for the longevity of the car. So an actual charge takes 4 hours, or I could trickle charge it for 24 hours, right? That's a projector. After about 4 hours, I have to stop and take a break. I have to unplug from wherever I'm plugged in. I have to recharge. And sometimes it can be a quick recharge, and other times I need a longer, more uninterrupted, free break of space.
I love that you own a car that represents your human design.
I know. I've had the car a lot longer than I've known about human design. When this came to me, I was like, oh my God, I'm literally my car. Now you, the manifesting generator, I like to explain the manifesting generator like a rocket ship that could like go to the moon. So I could try to take your rocket fuel and put it in my electric car, and it doesn't matter. It's not going to work. And the manifesting generator, I would say, is different from like a projector. A projector might be like a supercharged Ferrari. It can't go to the moon per se, but it could probably drive from the United States to New York in definitely a faster amount of time than the electric car can. So it's like those little nuances that we get to start to understand about our energy and honor that, like, we're all here to do things differently. Doesn't mean one's bad or worse.
Yeah, because I guess this plays into the bigger picture of, the comparisonitis that so many people fall into a spiral around. The why can't I be like them, or and we do admire in others that which is available in us. But I think what I'm liking about this conversation around human design is it's also kind of saying, even though it's available, it's not intrinsic. And because it's not intrinsic, that's why it doesn't feel like it's as available or as readily available. So would you say that the gift in the human design, because someone can still be like, well, I still want to be a rocket ship, or I still want to be a Ferrari instead of an electric car. And then that doesn't really solve the problem. But does human design really help them understand what's so epic about an electric car that needs to be charged? Is that kind of the distinction? So
Absolutely.
that yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it sort of allows you to like integrate without force. This is how I'm designed to be. This is how and you start to see like it, part of understanding that I was a projector was developing a revolutionary relationship with rest and really honoring my rest and noticing over time through my own experience and integration and experiment with this. Okay, so I'm supposed to rest. What happens when I rest? Wow, I have this immense access to deeper clarity, more channel, more intuition, more presence. Like these other areas get to open up because I've created space for the way that I'm, in my design to rest.
Yeah. Well, this is true, isn't it? I mean, the biggest epidemic that we have in the world that's really harming our health is our constant editing of ourselves to fit the narrative, and in doing so, losing that which is the magic we're here to really share with the world. So I love this. So tell me more about my chart beyond energy or consistency.
Okay. Yes.
How does this help me? What would I know knowing or not looking at my chart beyond even just the the manifesting generator? Sorry, I'm getting all
Yeah. That's okay.
beyond that, yeah, like, so how would I look at my chart and go, okay, this might be why I'm struggling in this area, or this is where I need to go to really feel more alive? Like, is that what the chart helps me do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with one of the centers called the solar plexus, or the emotional center, right? Yeah. This is one of, and this is these other pieces. Each center has its own high frequency way of functioning or low frequency way of functioning, right? We would call it the healthy or the unhealthy, the conditioned or the enlightened, so the solar plexus center is one of those centers that has the potential to be a very sticky center, that has the potential to have a lot of conditioning in it, and has the potential to really derail you or derail a human, right?
Yes, very familiar with solar plexus, and it's
absolutely.
I'm kind of smiling already, waiting for this. So let's.
I know. I'm like, let's get in. So we both have undefined solar plexuses, and there's those different gates that come off that center. There's different levels of what we would call definition. You only have one gate, I only have one gate, although they're different. So this undefined solar plexus is how we feel emotions, how we experience other people's emotions, and how we often this undefined solar plexus tends to take on the emotions for everybody, hold on to them, process them for them. Oftentimes it can feel like, I don't know what is mine or what is not. I know I'm angry or I know I'm frustrated, but I don't know why. And then not only do we take them in, we tend to then amplify them. So the unhealthy state, like this undefined solar plexus says, I don't feel comfortable feeling feelings. I don't want to feel my feelings. Feelings are way too big. Emotions are unpredictable. I don't even want to go there. So we tend to be vulnerable to the needs and moods of others around us. And so we're like, well, I'm not going to have that uncomfortable conversation with you because I know how you're going to feel. So I'm just going to skip the conversation and not actually speak my truth.
Yeah. So the people pleaser could definitely be someone with a undeveloped, you said, solar plexus.
Undefined.
Undefined. Yeah.
And so it has, it's one of the deepest centers that's opening to the conditioning of not of avoiding emotions and avoiding confrontation and avoiding truth. And because emotions can be extremely uncomfortable. Emotions are big. Emotions, I often say to people, if you go to somebody and they say, how are you? And you're like, I'm emotional. They're not like, not like, let me dive in and ask you more. They're like, oh, okay, never mind. Like, I don't want to get into that. Right. It just, societally, emotions are not something that we are taught how to manage, deal with, and right. Like the opposite side. So I like to describe, or we often use like the solar plexus center as like a window, and the window with the screen is like the sticky emotion, people's emotions get stuck in there. And how healthy expression would be a window with no screen, where somebody's emotions come in, you're aware, they process right through. You maybe use them as information. You're like, oh, okay, I see what's going in here. You can feel it really deeply, but you allow the emotions to flow through you without letting them make a home in you and live in you for days, months, years at a time.
Yeah.
The beauty of this.
For me personally, I can relate to definitely when I was younger, like walls around emotions, just mechanics. But now I would say that, after like endless growth work and, transformational work that I've done, that yeah, it's actually like a superpower almost to be able to utilize emotions as information for transformation for people, and to recognize in myself immediately feelings and to process them in the now, because not processing feelings, team, if you're listening, is really what's causing all of the sickness in the world. So yeah, so I can see that that's definitely been a big part of my path or my journey, and a very important one, really important
Absolutely.
in what I teach and what I do now. Yeah.
Yeah, and each center has like the ability to have an immense gift, and that's the gift of the open solar plexus. It's like, or the undefined solar plexus. It's like I can feel everything. I'm aware, and you get this beautiful ray of like the experiences of life, of like the joy, the bliss. And yes, there's the opposite, but they're it's like you have to feel the joy and the bliss. You got to feel this too. You got to, and the healthy solar plexus is like, I'm going to set boundaries. I'm going to take responsibility for my emotional health. I'm going to learn emotional intelligence. You get to go through all those, which is what you're talking about with the growth.
I'm still working on the boundaries and the desire to not always make everyone that I love happy. That's still there, and that's still part of my path. But I definitely, yeah, I can see the growth in that space, and also the ways in which previously very blocked in the solar plexus. Yeah. And also how that manifested physically for me with certain issues too, related to that chakra.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the other two that I thought were interesting when I looked at your chart were the head center is also undefined, and the root center is undefined. It's pretty much all your undefined centers. They're both, the head and the root are both pressure centers. So the head is like this pressure to know, mental pressure, which could be like inspiration or confusion and doubt and needing to figure it out and like having the right answers and not wanting to be wrong and like that kind of energy. I see you nodding.
Yeah. It's actually interesting because the head center, are we talking like the sixth chakra there, the third eye?
That would be the second one in human design. That's the ajna.
Okay, yes. But here. Yeah. So for sure, again, similar sort of story to the solar plexus. The journey has been massive rumination, overthinking, mental, being the biggest block, truly, even to this day. My mind will run away on itself. And yet I also know through a lot of experiences and, light workers who have light language skills, that my third eye is very 360. So it has that double-edged sword of always being in the question and always wanting to know more, but also really as a result being very open to the everything. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's kind of the duality exists there, and I've experienced the duality in this lifetime very intensely at times on both sides. So yeah, that also makes sense, that it's not locked and fixed. So what I'm hearing about this undefined is that has potential for a lot of leakage and kind of attack almost, but it's also got a lot of potential for fluidity and agility. Would that be true?
Absolutely. Yeah, you get, and that's the beauty of it. It's like you can be in the unhealthy state or the low frequency state where it's like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed, I'm doubt, confusion, trying to answer everybody's questions, trying to get it right, trying to know the answers, trying to resolve all this mental pressure. I have an undefined head too, so I get that. And the gift, the wisdom of the undefined head is like inspiration, ideas, totally open to all directions and all possibilities, and the polarity and the duality and the wonder and the uncertainty and the unknown, and being okay with that and being like, okay, I'm not going to act on the pressure to need to know the answer. I'm just going to be in the unknown and enjoy the question and the confusion and the curiosity.
So Jasmine, I have a question then, because if you and I both have undefined head centers, or, if this is a thing, would someone say in contrast, I can think of a few people in my life who are super black or white. Like it's that, or it's just that. Like it's just that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, boom, that's it. That's how it is. Not flexing, not giving. On the concept would that be someone who's got a very defined?
Yep, absolutely. You're like, yeah, you're hitting on the nail on the head. Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like sometimes if we think about like something being undefined or lacking gates, it can sound like an quote unquote negative thing, but as as you and I'm hoping a lot of the listeners really are understanding, there is never good or bad. There's either effective or ineffective, or, as you're saying, it's either serving us or it's not. But the benefit, I suppose, so to that defined or defined chakra is there's a sense of security but there can also potentially be a sense of stuckness or lack of flexibility. Would that be true?
Yep, absolutely. Okay. The defined head is like, this is the way it is, this is the way it is, this is the way it is. And the beautiful thing is when we have the lens of human design, if you know you have a defined head, then you're like, oh, I might be stuck in my fixed way of thinking. Can I relax that and not be ruled by my mind, and instead empower others to give me their insights and inspiration, and then decide if I want to take it or not.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then I imagine it's much the same as like love languages or any tool of self-awareness. If you also understand the map of another, then you can understand why you're not on the same page. So it would help with things like conflict, and help with things like, instead of like, why can't they just be like me and understand this? It'd be like, oh, that's right, because you're not able to see the 360-degree view that I'm witnessing. You are literally looking at it front on. So for your reality, that is the only thing here, which, potentially initially doesn't necessarily dissolve the frustration, but it could in time for sure, right?
Right. And it's so fun. I think what I laughed in the beginning when you said, you have friends who are like human design, unless I'm like brushing my teeth or taking a poop, like everything is human design. And it's like, it comes to this point where like, for some people, for me, it resonated so much that I was like, I speak in the language of human design, and it gives me a lens to understand other people, to understand myself, and to look at so many facets, relationship, business, entrepreneurship, through these different centers and through these different lenses, and go, oh, well, that might be why I have a problem with pricing, because have an undefined heart, or whatever it might be. That might be why I'm so worried about people pleasing, because I have an undefined solar plexus.
Awesome. And so what is an undefined? I'm kind of I have an idea of what an undefined root chakra might mean.
Yep.
But let's do the dance. So
the undefined,
interpret this for me is, and I was in a reading, you'd say what about my undefined?
So the root is a pressure center, like I said, like the head's the pressure to know. The root is the pressure to do. And the root is also a motor. So if someone had a defined root, they would have this constant access to drive and to do and to. Now the undefined root has this inconsistent way of processing pressure and can be overwhelmed and say, oh, there's too much to do, I forget it, I do nothing, I'm overwhelmed, I avoid it. We use human design in my business and my work, and one of the things is like, if you send me an email that says this has to be done by 5 o'clock at night, I'm like, oh, like it just like makes me want to not do anything, and I can't process it. The stress of that is overwhelming to me. But if you said, hey, can you get this to me by the end of the week? All of a sudden I have 3 days where I'm like, okay, I get to, play with the stress or the, what am I going to do that versus feeling the pressure and then potentially avoiding it to the last minute. So
yeah, continue.
Yeah. So the root is where the body holds stress. And stress is important. This is what we were talking about, like the physical body. This is where the adrenals are, and human design asks us to rethink how we communicate and how we're in relationship with stress. So stress is important. Stress is necessary. It drives life forward, and it shouldn't be the only thing that drives us forward. We shouldn't be like, I'm just doing this to relieve the pressure.
Well, then, yeah, because then we're never in the bliss of the moment, are we? But I agree with you. I often talk about stress has kind of got this really negative stigma, but it's actually the accelerant of growth for all living things. But, and I mean this on the micro and the macro, like as someone who's come from heavily kind of health and wellness focused, that's how a muscle grows, is under load and under stress. And then through that you can call it trauma, challenge, whatever it is. It has to adapt and evolve to then have the capacity. And, you know, the sign of kind of the fittest animal or the fittest human is the capacity to go into intense stress physically, like super high heart rate, and then recover quickly. So, you know, really, as we're getting more agile or more capable in life, it's actually, can I come at stress and then be as quickly as possible back in my center? But we need that stress to develop that muscle, that flex response. So I get you on that. And I think if you're listening, you know, there's two parts to this. I think if we can look at stress as a gift and a guide to helping us return to center, but also look at where we've perhaps overly identified our significance with the amount of stress that we have in our lives, because that's a story I had to face off with years ago and just chose to let go of. But for a long time there, it was like, you know, the busier I am and, you know, the more stressed I am and the more hectic I am. I mean, gosh, I was like a cat in a corner for a long time there. I don't know how people dealt with me, but energetically it was like, well, I'm doing things in the world, you know, that are important if I'm constantly like never have enough time. You know, I laugh now, but I mean that was where I was. And I see people in that space now. And of course there gets to be another way to relate to stress and to not feel the overwhelm. But it's interesting because I would have thought that you were going to say root chakra is kind of the family or the need for either connection to or like this basis, not necessarily the doing. But I get now on an energy level, we're talking about being so grounded in this material plane that it's the action taking in this space. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And, you know, just like you said, with the root, like we're designed to learn to manage that fuel as that stress as fuel. And if you're running too rich, if we're going with the car analogy, like you're going to crash and burn. And so you have to like, you know, learn to, you know, manage it correctly. Yeah. So the root center, when we're talking about the gates, there's all these different, the 64 gates that we mentioned, there's different, now this is getting like advanced. There's different circuitry that like some is tribal, some is individual, some is, and so one of me, for example, I have only one channel and that's an individual channel and it's a internal self-inquiry channel. You have a couple different ones that are kind of all over, which is kind of fun to talk about too, but that's a little bit more advanced.
Just talking about it because I'm fine to use me as an example and then I'll spread it out from there, because I think it gives people an insight into what they would access when they do a session with you. So what I wanted to ask there is when you said that, what came up for me, what just dropped in is like, oh, introvert, extrovert, you know, like from the truest sense of the word, which I've had to, you know, share with people over time, is this internal generation of energy versus external seeking of energy. So, you know, a lot of people think it's to do with confidence or whatever else. But so when you said you've got this single individual channel, would that mean that you're more, and therefore also because you're a projector and needing downtime, it's doubling down, would it be, on your need to really take time essentially to go within for yourself as opposed to resting in other ways? Like, is that how we start to see the nuance?
Yeah, that definitely works as far as like, absolutely. I require a lot of alone time, a lot of self-inquiry with my journal and meditation. Like, and as I've learned that over the years through my own evolution, my own growth, I'm like, oh, this refuels me, as opposed to somebody who potentially has a defined root. They can be refueled by stress of life. My best friend is a generator who has a defined root. And she's like, oh, I need like somebody to be like, you have this, you know, event on Friday and today's Thursday and we need 7,000 things. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds terrible. She's like, oh no. And then I'm like, whoa, let's go. Like it turns on. So, you know, there's the variances and it's
awesome. What gates do I have active in my root?
So in your root, the one gate that you have active is the pressure to feel, or the pressure to feel new experience and have new experiences.
That's just hilarious. So that's very true. So when you said before about the undefined root, and then you said something about, you know, a defined root, or the root is where we generate the doing. And so one of my most persistent patterns, or my awareness of myself, is this very, I would argue, highly productive in some ways. Like I can literally do the 5 things at once. Like in a kitchen, you know, my partner's like, it's like a tornado, but like in my brain, I know that that needs 10 minutes on there. So I got that on. And in that time, I'm doing the thing, and then I'm doing the thing. And inside like an hour and a half, I can pull out, or not even an hour and a half, in 45 minutes, I can pull out like 5 things. And he's like, one of those would have taken me an hour and a half. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there is this ability to push multiple trains, but it also which has been great as a multifaceted entrepreneur. Um, and also I would say it's helped me to wear multiple hats, like mother, lover, and entrepreneur, and individual soul seeking her own truth. Like all of those things feel really comfortable happening all at once for me. But at the same time, when I look at certain areas that I would love to be further ahead in or more impactful in, this kind of like bullets in every direction approach has sometimes been the greatest detriment, you know, to me. So would that be, just looking firstly before we get into what you just said about new things, because as soon as you said that, I was like, that's so accurate. But would that be a kind of a good example of a non-defined route, like kind of energy going everywhere?
So there's a couple different pieces there. There's the manifesting generator for sure. The undefined root of this like do with that gate of like the pressure to like, you always want to have these new experiences. I always want to feel something new. I was like, so you're always going to have that there. And a couple other pieces in your chart that but yeah, there's another piece that I'm thinking of that like, you have to have your hands in things. Your profile line is a 3-5. You're like trial and error. Got to try it out. Got to figure it out. Got to experiment with it.
Yes, that's very true. And actually, what I wanted to maybe share for people, because I'm already feeling like, just through other processes, you know, and obviously I have a school of growth, so growth work's my jam, right? But what I heard you say there is very true. I am constantly seeking the new experience. Like excitement is and anticipation is one of my most loved feelings, you know, in my body. And I just come fully alive when it's like, what's that going to be like, right? Whereas other people are like, I don't want to know what that's like. Just give me the same old, same old. And equally at the same time, of course, we're all of it. And I have certain things that you know, like my smoothie, I have the same smoothie every day. Super boring in its repetition, but I'm obsessed with it. So coming back to what I heard you say though, is in business, and you know, a lot of my listeners are either entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs or have an entrepreneurial creator energy. I have found to know this about myself. Like when I want to learn about something, I go real deep and real wide, and I learn everything there is to learn about it from all of the teachers. So the multifaceted learning from everyone to distill like a midline truth or a kind of a shortcut for others. It's a bit of a pattern for me. And then I teach it.
Yep.
And I teach it and I'm so in love with it. I'm so in love with it. And then at some point it's like, it becomes grindy, and I'm like, I've said that 1,000 times and I'm bored of saying that, and I don't want to say that again ever. And so, you know, I have a business that I started 20 years ago, and only until just this year I just handed it on. But I have found ways to re-enroll myself. So I share this because even though I'm listening to you say, yeah, you've always got to be doing new things, well, it's like, well, how do you stay in long-term relationships, or how do you stay in long-term in business? And it's re-enrollment and reinvigoration with new innovations has done that for me. And what I also did is, I know that about myself. I know that when I teach something, I'm probably going to want to teach it 3 to 5 years or however many cycles of it. And so then I set up like mentorship, and I train up someone, and then I hand it on, because then I'm like done with it and I don't want to touch it, but it needs to be out in the world. So I create all the systems, love teaching it, and then I teach someone else. So I don't know if that's like helpful in this space to share, but I can relate to that, and I can see that it would absolutely cause me an inability to be maybe, well, you know, quote unquote successful in whatever measure traditional society wants to use. But I'm also seeing how maybe if I didn't have to learn this through the years and adapt and grow through my mad obsession for growth, someone else could have someone read their chart like you just did and said, so here's how you can work with that to create more consistency and more lineage. I mean, more long-term kind of sticking. Is that kind of, I can see how this chart's really valuable.
Yeah, it's super valuable. And a lot of what you spoke to right now is this, it's a combination of your profile, which we just touched on, the 3-5, which happens to be my exact profile as well. There's 12 different variations. So not a lot, but that's one of the pieces of my chart that's very similar that I can relate to you, where it's like, I have multifaceted, like I spent a decade, working in the medical field as a medical assistant. I have a degree in biology and health science. And then I was like, oh my gosh, there's this whole other world out there that's like holistic and alternative. And I ended up, getting a certification in hypnotherapy and NLP and meditation, and then a yoga teacher training. And, just like, it just kept going and going. That's the three line. It's like, try it out. And I'm obsessed with it. And like, until it's complete. And then you're like, oh, okay, this is done. And the 3 has this energy of like, they call it bonds meant to be broken, which can feel like, ooh, like weird in the beginning, but it's also like, when you have that information, at some point you're probably going to be over this. And so set up the systems, get the things dialed in, because it's important. You want to share it. You love it. It's been such an integral part of who you are in your development and your evolution and your growth. And one of the things that I was talking to myself, which I do a lot, which is one of a couple of variations of kind of how you use your authority in human design as self-talk, but not mine. But anyway, going back, saying like, in this 3 line where you're talking about relationships or long-term commitments, it's like what you said earlier is like, it's just a renegotiation, like renegotiating what does this look like for me now? Renegotiating, where do I want to be involved in this? How do I want to be involved in this? Where do I want this to evolve? Like my husband and I have been married 11 years. And like, there's been so many iterations of who I've been in our marriage, my relationship with myself, my relationship with my relationship with him. And, there's been a lot of facets that have changed inside of the container of the relationship, but the relationship's always been consistent. If that makes sense.
That's a great frame of a healthy relationship, I would argue, the ability for you to evolve and constantly change, and have that still be a safe container. That's beautiful. Okay. So what else?
So one of the things I wanted to touch on, which I just happened to mention, and I feel like, I'm getting like, you need to talk about this because somebody needs to hear it. So is the heart center. Now your heart center is defined, which the heart center is like the will, the motivation, like you could move mountains with your sheer will, which is, again, great. And always both and, right? Like both, and you could drive yourself into the ground because you're like, I said, I'm going to do the thing. I'm doing the thing. I'm showing it, when like your heart maybe actually isn't in it anymore. Right. So there's that piece. And then for me, I have an undefined heart. So like, I can be like, okay, I'm going to do this 30-day thing. And then like 3 days in, I'm like, yeah, I cannot will myself to like do the thing anymore. Or I could go into a pattern of like, well, I suck. I'm the worst. Why can't I just force myself? Why can't I just make myself do it? Like, what's wrong with me? Could go into this like negative pattern, right? Or loop. But if I know, like, it's just like my undefined heart that's like, seeking to try, the undefined heart can sometimes seek to try to prove their value or prove their worth through like, the unhealthy way, where like the defined heart is like, I'm worthy no matter what. And like, I said I was going to do that thing. I'm going to do that thing, even though I don't want to do that thing. My heart's not in that thing. So it's like, there's this wisdom on both ends. And in the entrepreneurship realm, like it gets really funny when we start to talk about like pricing and pricing offers and pricing whether you're pricing from the undefined heart and you're like, let me prove my worth and let me hustle for my worth. And like, is this worth it? Am I good enough? This is like imposter syndrome, even though maybe you've been studying something for 5 years and you have certifications and you're like, well, as opposed, right?
Yeah, this is so common. I mean, it's, well, and I get this, I'm hearing what you're saying from the human design perspective, but I do feel that just humanness for a lot of us, it comes with this kind of, am I worthy, like as essentially the ticket in, because otherwise we'd realize just how magical we are because we're all just stars. Yeah, that's interesting. That's cool.
Yeah. And like, the heart center, it's like, it drives, it's the engine that drives a lot of life: willpower, ego, desire, core desires, self-worth, like all of that lives in the heart center. And it provides this freedom of like, is my heart in it or not? It's very simple when we ask that, of the heart center, like, does this give me freedom? Is this give me energy, or does it not? It's like when we get to ask, like what you mentioned earlier, like nothing determines our self-worth. We're worthy because we're intrinsically worthy because we're here, because we exist. Like the only thing that determines your worth is your view of yourself and your thoughts about worth. You're worthy for doing nothing, no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. Wouldn't be here if you weren't.
Yeah.
So how does all of this relate to, like, say for instance, like health, physical, like does it all kind of show up as well? I mean, on a metaphysical level, do people sometimes come, like I imagine people would come for sure to human design who are, I don't know what my purpose is, or I'm stuck and I'm, I don't know to go this way or that way, like help me, the same way that maybe someone would seek out astrology or look to be coached, really. And I can see it would be a very powerful tool in those spaces. But what about someone who's like, I have chronic fatigue, or I keep having, I've got all these issues in my womb space, like it's showing up in the body in a particular way. Like, does human design have an application? I mean, I imagine it does, but I'm just asking the question anyway. So,
Yeah. Every chakra corresponds with the body, specific body parts. For example, we talked about the root, like the adrenal system. So if you have an undefined root and you have your adrenals are shot and you are having, adrenal fatigue, like we got to look at the stress and how you're managing stress in your life and how you're digesting that stress.
There you go. Yeah, back in the day.
Right.
Full on adrenal fatigue. So yes. So that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it makes total sense. Yeah. So there's so many ways to look at it. And yeah, so that you get the physical body that you get to say like, okay, so, there's different, we could go into another center, but like different ways to say like, to keep your body healthy. That's the spleen center, is like to keep you alive and keep you healthy and keep you thriving. And so how do we tap into those different things? One of the things that we haven't touched on and is a kind of a big deal in human design is sort of your authority, which is your is to help you in your decision making. So none of the designs are made to decide from their thinking mind. None of the strategies are think your way through it.
Jasmine, isn't that interesting? May I just point out, world, that the pro and the con list doesn't obviously really factor, and yet here we are trying to make what's the smartest decision, what makes the most sense. And what I just heard Jasmine say, I'm going to repeat it, is not one of the human designs actually should be making decisions from their mind. Wow, let's all take note, because yeah, imagine if we started to have different conversations about how to decide things. So enlighten us.
So we're all designed to take action from our body. Now we all have different, so the generator, the manifesting generator, you're designed to take, your authority is sacral authority. So that life force energy. I like to describe it as like a mini GPS system where you get to check in at every corner. Like, is this a yes? Is this a no? And one of the ways to do that is you can do that out loud. Like, do I want tacos? You will very quickly get a body response of like, it's a yes or a no. Do you want to go to the movies? Yeah, I do. Do you want to see a scary movie? Nope, don't want to see. It's like, the sacral center is this little mini GPS center that you can check in at every corner. And if you make a wrong turn, it's like, oh, rerouting. It's easy. Ask again. The body will tell you.
Yes, the body definitely will tell you. So that's a manifesting generator, but how would a generator make?
Same. Generator's the same, sacral response. And so you're here to respond to life, to respond. Like, this lights me up, this doesn't.
Okay. So then how would a projector
so the projector is, well, there's two pieces here. Projectors they're here to wait for the invitation. part of that is because of the ability to see and guide. Sometimes, for example, you can go to your friend and be like, hey, I don't think you should be dating that guy anymore because blah, blah, blah. And your friend could be like, excuse me, I didn't ask for your advice. I don't want that, And so part of the projector is waiting for someone to say, well, what do you think? And you're like, oh, thank God, because I have so many things that I think, but sometimes you could have the friend who you're like, I don't want all your opinions and advice and all the things. So the projector waits for the invitation. And then there's different strategies that projectors could have different strategies. For example, different, oh my gosh, brain. I'm a splenic projector. So my authority, thank you, brain. My authority is the spleen is the oldest awareness center. It's very quiet. It's that, oh, maybe there's a lion in there. Like that very, very ancient, very quiet, very primal way of being, and it's a whisper, and they say it only speaks once, so you have to be very quiet and present to hear it or to feel it in the body. It's the intuition that, oh, I had a feeling that I had that feeling. And my mentor says, like this, it's not that the spleen, well, it speaks once in the now moment, but there's so you've got to kind of be present in each now moment to hear the spleen. Yeah. I don't have the access to the GPS to go, okay, spleen, what is it, a yes or is it a no now? Is it a yes or is it a no now? It's like it comes when it comes, and I have to be aware and quiet and present. So, and there's different, so there could be splenic projectors, there could be ego, which is the heart-centered projectors. There could be different sort of ways the projectors could be, but all projectors are here to wait for the invitation. That's the strategy. And manifestors are here to inform. And manifestors,
how do they decide?
They decide by, well, let's see. I'm trying to think if there's more. My husband is a manifestor, and I'm like, okay, that's how so they have different, so it could be different. So he's an emotional manifestor. So his decision-making process is riding his emotional wave until he's sort of back at neutral. So there's the manifestor, there's different, every type has a different way that they can respond. Well, the projector, now I'm just contradicting myself.
What I'm hearing is that when someone gets their chart done, it isn't just about falling into a bucket of like introvert, extrovert. It's going to be nuanced,
Right.
And I think that that's beautiful. And I think also listening to what you shared earlier, when we said that you are obviously a projector, and that you have like that one channel in your root chakra for individual, that you're like, so journaling and meditation and time alone, and now you're a spleen projector, so you really need the silence and the stillness. And then, there are people who, when they meditate, like for me, for instance, sometimes moving meditation, like swimming or running in nature, like it's like there's a rhythmic, it's like the body gets taken care of, and then suddenly it's like epiphany, or I'll go into a seated meditation, and I'll come out with like so many ideas that I have to write down. And my partner's like, that's not what meditation's about. It's supposed to be, because he just goes and astral projects, or he does, like, that's how it is for you, and this is how it is for me, and so he'll be like, well, what are we going to meditate today, or whatever, we meditate separately as well, and I'll be like, actually, I'm going to like move today, like do a flow sort of yogic meditation, or I'm going to run, and he's like, yeah, but are you going to meditate as well? And I'm like, it's like different for me. So he's one of the people, I bet if you did his chart, his mind chakra would be fully defined. Yeah. And that's why, like, for sure, fully defined. But is that kind of where we get to, like, there are so many wonderful hacks, if you will, that get shared by so many amazing humans on the planet. And kind of in the same way that what I teach about survival codes is that you can't really take someone's abundance code and love code and plug it into your system. You have to do the inner work to assess what codes you already have, and then through your own sovereign, right, address them in the ways that serve you best. And so this idea of constantly just looking externally to how someone's winning at life and then taking their quote unquote hack and then beating yourself up because after a whole month or, as you were saying, 3 days or 3 months, it's like, I can't do it. It's just not for me, is because it genuinely isn't for you. It's not for your system, not for your way of being, it's just not aligned. It would be the kind of catch-all phrase. But I think what I liked about what you just shared about discernment is it's cool to start to figure out how to figure that out quicker, because I think a lot of people waste a lot of time feeling like they're just failing, but they're literally trying to be someone else's strategy of success that is not actually well designed for them at all. So there's the word design. So human design, understanding your design so that you can step into the things that are better designed for you. Would that be right?
Absolutely. We're all so unique. We're all so different with all of our life experiences, with everything that we've gone through, with how we're designed to be, with how our energy works, that we get to look at through a lens of what works for me and how does it feel in my body, and how do I explore this, and how do I experiment with checking in and saying or how do I, and we get to have a lens where, like, there's so many hacks that I've like, get up early, get a routine, like but I'm like, and then you think, oh, why doesn't it work for me? Why can't I just do what everybody else is doing? There's no cookie cutter approach that's going to work for you the way it works for somebody else, because you are an intrinsically unique, beautiful soul with your own design.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that, truth is truth in all domains, and I think that that is one of the pure truths, because lots of things are not truth, right? But if there's a truth that I truly do believe is true, is this bio-individuality, and as in there are elements that are present in all, but the alchemization, if you will, or the amounts and the way that they interweave together completely changes the flavor and the coloring, right? So just because we have like red and, well, no, yellow and green, or whatever the two colors are, the degree to which we even match and measure those two colors creates a completely different color. Add in other things and you've got a completely different, spectrum in reality. So I think that if someone out there is having the experience of, why can't I figure out how to do this in a way that sits well with me, this would be a really powerful tool to undertake, particularly for those, I imagine, who, and I'm not sure if this falls into a particular category, but who really do struggle with self-awareness and self-reflection, because that is the kind of core ingredient or foundational ingredient to all growth work or all change. Like even just literally going from A to B is to know where A is, right? Because if you don't know where A is, you can
if you're
know
not aware of A, you're not going to get to B.
You can know all about B and you can know all about the car, but if you don't know where the hell you are, it's a really difficult space to close. And so self-awareness is the key. And this sounds like just a really powerful tool that covers a lot of different modalities, because I'm hearing you speak on the energy and I imagine this relates to communication and all the things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you said, what did you just say? How it relates, like we're multifaceted humans and multi-layered, and we're emotional and we're mental and we're physical. And we get to look at all these different layers of all these different things and get a clearer picture, and we get to embody it. That's where the change really comes. It's like, I can give you all the information. You can read every book that there is on swimming. Until you get in the water, you don't know anything about swimming. You might do a dissertation on swimming.
Yeah, some people are just sinkers and some people are floaters when it comes to swimming. I've learned this about swimming, but it doesn't mean we can't all learn to swim. And I think
right, and the learning to swim is getting in the water and trying it out and embodying it and saying, well, what does it feel like for me to kick my legs? And this is what I love so much about human design. It's like, we get to take this information, we get to take this map, we get to take this energetic blueprint and go, okay, well, but how does it work for you? And how are you uniquely you, and how are you embodying that and living that out in your everyday life?
And so for like, what would be the top 3 ways that people often will come or would seek out like the use of human design? Like if you were looking at your clients, are they coming, yeah, what, you know, for someone who's listening is like, well, is this for me? Who might know by what you next share that actually this is a tool that can totally give you the keys?
Yeah. My clients usually have done they've done some personal development work, they've done some spiritual development work, they've done some self-inquiry, they have some awareness, but there feels like there's something still maybe just a teensy bit off, or like a tiny little tweak, or like something I'm not really super clear about. Whether that's in their personal life or their business, or, you know, I always say, like, your business and your life are in relationship. They're not separate. They're always together. So, you know, it's like you get a little hack as to like how you might get more clarity for yourself and communicate with yourself better, decision make better, and understand the nuanced ways of your being. For example, desiring, you know, new experiences all the time, like just knowing like, oh, that's just intrinsic to who I be. It's not something that's wrong with me. That I have one of the channels is like, this desire to always want more. Like I always want more of everything. I want more friends. I want more connection. I want more intimacy. I want more. And it's like, it's not that I'm unhappy. It's just that I'm going to have this always sort of insatiable thirst, and that's okay.
Yeah, I imagine I have that channel too, whichever channel that is. You could tell me. But I think that's true, because through the filter of someone else's perspective, reality, and human design, that same insatiable moreness could be, well, you're never satisfied, or, you know, like, I think what I'm hearing is that this map or, you know, tool really allows us to let go of the judgment of the ways in which we're different and come into an appreciation instead of, well, not only our unique qualities, but also what's available and present in someone else. And that's always a good thing. That's always a good thing. So, Jasmine, like for you and your own personal journey, you know, what would you say? Because this is, you know, a lot of my crew are really people who are into growth and really want to grow. So, along your journey, and you've obviously done so many things, what would you say was the most impactful, or aside from human design, because obviously that's really captured your heart, um, and your path right now, but what would you say would be the most impactful either container or book or experience that just really, I don't know, either put you on the right path or accelerated your growth? And you can share one or many.
Mm-hmm. The first one that comes to mind, and this was early on in my journey, and like I shared, I was, you know, worked in the medical field, bachelor's in biology and health science, very like, it's either A or B. So to go from that to here, it's a big variance. One of the first books that I read that I was like, what is this? I don't understand, was Biology Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton. Love that book. That blew my mind open. And that led me to look into, experiment with, understand hypnotherapy and neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. And that led me to Dr. Joe Dispenza and his work. And so that any of his books, Becoming Supernatural, it's only one I can think of at the top of my head, but
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Yeah,
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. That was the first one that I read. That's a great one. And like, it speaks to so many layers of the work that I do with the unconscious, with human design, with somatics, with energetics, with embodiment. You know, the unconscious mind to me is the most fascinating thing in the whole world. And how we're patterned to be, and how our somatics are patterned to be, how we're just used to feeling a particular way. The example I'll often give my clients is like, try to get dressed differently than you get dressed. Like if you put your right leg in your pants all the time, try to put your left leg in your pants and see how different that feels. That's coming against your unconscious patterning, that like one way's right or wrong.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love, I'm laughing because, you know, so much of what you shared is mirrored, even though we have very different human designs. You know, the path is very similar, like, and because you said, you know, about our life paths being the same. So I have an aviation and science degree, you know, and it's much the same, and had my own awakenings in my own ways. But what I wanted to say, what was I going to say? It just fell out of my brain. Oh, what I wanted to share was how how we came to have this conversation, because I kind of even love the synchronicity of that, and the fact that even though we both have degrees in science, we had both seen a poster online, and we didn't know each other. And there was actually in the post, the people's names, 2 names of the people, and their program had the same initialing. And I'm literally an alliteration junkie, and I'm always seeing the pattern and the pattern and the pattern and the patterns. And I just love what you just shared. And this is why I'm driving into it. Like, I'm obsessed with the observation of patterns, really, and helping people, recreate ones much the same way as you do. So I had seen this pattern, and what's really bizarre about this is I don't even overly necessarily follow or associate with that particular post or that person, and I definitely never comment, and I definitely never even read a comment, right? So I don't even know what, I mean, obviously something much higher than me guided me to even go into the comment thread. Like, I'm like, why am I going into I didn't even think why I'd go in comment thread. I'm in the comment thread. I read down, and like, people are commenting like, oh, this is amazing, love this program, whatever. And then there's this comment that says, wow, look at that synchronicity of, and then pointed out exactly what my brain had just said. Oh, look, surname, programs names, exactly the same. Can't believe the synchronicity of that. And I like, it was just such, literally the comment was the thought that I had just had. So I then just couldn't help myself. I never comment. I never read comments. Notice all of these things I never do. And yet here I am doing them. And so then I put in the comment response, something like, I was thinking the exact same thing, right? And then here's something else I never do. I then clicked on, the handle of the person who had made the comment, which happened to be Jasmine. So then I go to Jasmine's page, and here's the really crazy thing. I see that she's a human design expert. Not even a week earlier in a staff meeting, I'm like, I want to interview someone on the podcast about human design. Who do we know? And I know lots of people who are obsessed with human design, but it didn't feel, they're not trained in it. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And so I was like, we need to find someone, let's put our feelers out. And so then as soon as I saw that, and again, something I don't do, I just like direct, I think within a little bit, direct message. I'm like, hey, I know this seems a little weird, and I know it's just because I commented on your comment, but would you like to be on my podcast? And so I'm very big in following the signs, especially when they're that kind of fluid and flowing. But what I like about what you've shared today, and I don't know, Jasmine, if you can kind of see this, or if this is true or plays out to what you shared today. So as a generator, and what am I, a manifesting generator? It's like, I'm open, I'm seeing all of these things at once, and then I'm just taking the action, right? Like, just doing the thing. And then you got invited.
Responding to life,
Yeah.
responding to
I'm like,
life.
okay. And I do that very quickly. I'm very like fast in my thinking and in my way of being and in life. Like, my animal is like a hummingbird, as my partner says, and he's
I love that. Oh God, talk about science. Continue.
Yeah. And then but what I'm loving is when you said you're the projector, it's like you need the invitation. And so I invited you, and then of course you were like, yes. Does that make sense? It was like, even as I heard that earlier, I'm like, oh, I'm going to point this out to her. But isn't that beautiful?
Yes, absolutely. I think, and it's so funny what you share. Like, I don't intrinsically necessarily follow that person. Like, I couldn't tell you the last time I commented on any, like, and then I saw your comment and I was like, oh my God, like, nobody else was noticing this, like, very like jumping out pattern to me. And then I, went to your page and I was like looking around and liking, and I saw your daughter, and I was just like, oh God, like, just sending so much love. And like, I just was like, oh, I just felt such a resonance with you. And then like the next day or that night or something, you showed up in my messages, and I was like, hell yes. But that's the beautiful part of being the projector, is like that invitation where it's like, that's where the juicy, the goodness comes from. And I'm such a believer of signs and synchronicities, and that there's so much more happening in the invisible realm and the invisible strings that I could ever imagine. And like the hummingbird mention that you made, that's my sign for my grandmother. And so like, it's like, she's like, oh, hi, meow, just popping in to say hi, like, but it's such a joy to like be in this work where you get to work in all the realms and in all the layers of how we be and who we are and what makes us And I just, I felt such a resonance with you. And although we're very different, there's a lot of similarities in our story. And it's just it's so exciting. So exciting.
Chills when you were talking. Yeah, 100%. And so let's do some rapid fire questions to finish off. And the first one is, what is your number one tip? So for someone listening today who's just in an energy slump, they just want more energy today, what's your go-to, or what would you suggest?
So what happens rapid fire. when we get stuck in an emotion, like a feeling lasts 90 seconds, the actual chemical reaction in our body lasts 90 seconds. We can get stuck in that and we can relive it and we can recreate it. So if you need to shift, get outside, get in nature, put your feet on the ground, move your body, move the energy, put on a song that you love, dance it out, move it around.
I agree. Well, energy is, emotion is energy in motion, isn't it? Yes.
Exactly.
Shifted. It's not permanent. It isn't who you are. Yeah, 100%. Okay, so what about if someone wants to experience more empowerment? What would be your tip for experiencing like a feeling of a greater empowerment, or coming into empowerment?
The first thing that popped into my mind, which is like random, but is like power posing, hands on the hips, like there's physicality, there's reasons that, there's a whole entire books that are written on like the psychology and biology of what happens when we put our hands on our hips, or arms over our head, or like one arm in the air and one arm on your hip. Like there's a resonance, there's a frequency, there's an energy change in your body. If all you do is, there's an entire book written on like, put your hands on your hip like Superman before you go into an interview. And
we call it the Wonder Woman pose in
yes.
the courses that I teach. Yeah. And I mean, look, let's be honest, Anthony Robbins made a career out of, strike your pose. And so, yeah. And just, I love that you mentioned that, because so often we think, oh, we've got to do, and, I love the deep dive. Let's go in and see what's there and do the things. But our physiology, as much as our psychology, and, Dispenza talks about this, it is a loop. It's pre-wired. And we know this when we look at people who won't look us in the eye, who are rounded through their shoulders, who are, feeling small and stuck in life, but then look at their bodies. Their bodies are, I am small and stuck. So if they even just, I remember actually, just sidetrack, I had a woman turn up at a retreat years ago, and I love this story about her because her transformation was phenomenal. And when she rocked up, she was so in the story, so in the anxiety. So she rocked up late. Everything was crazy. Life was hectic in her whole face. And you can't, if you're listening to this on a podcast, you're not catching this, but her entire expression was sour, and like angry and stressed. And of course I had a retreat. It's not like I could just go into her stuff for her, so I had to utilize what we had on the agenda. But one of the things I gave the whole retreat to do was literally to smile at this woman and to force her to just physically smile back. Like, even if it felt fake as fuck initially, right?
Oh my God.
So it's literally just the mechanics of smiling. And honestly, by the end of the 3 days, I mean, we also did a lot of other transformational stuff, but I wouldn't put it past just the fact that she had to physically smile, which does trigger certain chemicals in the brain, which then triggers, everything is affecting everything. And I love that you use just the stance, because it's true. It's just true. Open your shoulders. If you want to be more open to life, open your shoulders, open your heart, right? Lift your head, look up. It's just, don't ignore the body, as this, it just often gets overlooked, particularly when we get deeper into growth work. I think we become sometimes so esoteric that we're like forgetting that the magic is in this skin suit as well.
Yep. I love when, before you shared the part of smiling, the story that in my head was like, literally fake smiling sends dopamine and gabapentin and serotonin out into your body to the point where your body can't figure out if you're actually smiling for real or not. So like fake it.
I love it. And well, this is the thing where it seems like a toxic kind of strategy to say, fake it till you make it. And we don't need to fake it till we make it, because we are it, right? But there's that science behind, what is that, laughing yoga? When people are like, oh, I don't want to go and fake laugh, but you listen to someone fake laugh, you can't help but then real laugh, and then real laugh ripples into real laugh. It's the most hilarious experience. I mean, acting as if, until we are
posturing, and that's that, putting the hands on the hips. And it's like one of the things that like every frequency exists in the possibility. It's all out there. All we have to do is like shift into it. Like we don't have to reach for it. We don't have to go anywhere. We don't have to do anything. It just have to shift here.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and sometimes I think we, especially as the deeper work we get into, we're like, okay, I'm gonna meditate for an hour, and I'm gonna drink green juice, and I'm gonna do an hour of yoga. And it's like, no, just stop, be right here, right now for a moment, and check in with what do you actually need.
Yeah. And whatever it is you want to feel more of, if it's empowerment, just what would be an expression of that, which is kind of where you went to with the posturing. But for someone, it might just be like literally sounding out like a big loud, sound, because they just want to like empower that expression out. So Jasmine, let's imagine, because it's only an imagining, we're not creating this, that this entire podcast got deleted. And all that was left was the next sentence from you. And so it's a little bit, I know you love pressure because you mentioned it earlier in the podcast. So here it is, bring it, baby. So no pressure at all, but let's imagine you could write a love note and you had an eternity to write it, but you're going to deliver it today. So you've already written it. You had all the time in the world. You see, I'm trying to frame this for you. But now delivering this bottle, this message in a bottle, or this billboard, or this little earwig that you could literally just speak into, knowing that it's just in this moment, and that in 10 years' time, your answer may be very different, or in a week's time, it may be very different. But in this moment of time, what would be the one truth that you were like, hey, all my brothers and sisters out there, just remember this. Like, this is really friggin' important. What I've learned is
all the answers that you're looking for outside of yourself live within you.
Boom, nailed it, mic drop. So true, couldn't agree more, 100%.
Spend more time with yourself, sit with yourself, see yourself breathe, look at your body. All of the wisdom is in you.
Yeah, as the great sages of time have said again and again and again in their own ways, right? I agree. Beautiful. Jasmine, thank you so much for telling me about my human design. That's been very, very fascinating. And I can feel the resonance of truth in what you've shared. So thank you. And of course, I would love to unpack more and learn more, but we're going to link to you and to what you do. And people can obviously book sessions with you. And I know you're in America, and a lot of, I have tribe members over there too. Obviously, we're a global community, but we made our time zone work. So I know that people here in Australia can make their time zone work, and they should definitely reach out if they're curious and feel called to. So we'll make that easy to do. But unless there's anything else that you wanted to share, if you feel complete, cool.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, then
Thank
I think
you so
you're
much.
in the world, and I see your soul.
Such an honor to sit with you and experience your energy and get to see your energy on paper, and then get to sit in front of you and go, oh my God, this is actually, that's my favorite thing. So such a blessing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.